All right, let's get into it. We're going to tackle something really complex. What leads a person, or even a whole society, down that path to violence? You know, it's a journey that often starts in places we'd never expect, way before any physical act actually happens.
So, where does this all start? Well, it usually doesn't begin with just one person. The real story often kicks off in a society that's already showing these deep cracks, these signs of division. The backdrop for these individual journeys is often this culture of polarization, where it feels like opposing sides are living in completely different worlds.
Just picture this scene from London not too long ago. You've got two marches happening right next to each other. On one side, an anti-immigration far-right rally, and on the other, an anti-racism demonstration. I mean, these weren't just two groups of people with different opinions. These were two totally different visions for the entire country, clashing right there on the same city streets.
So when you see divisions that deep, it forces you to ask a really urgent question, right, for all of us. How does a society that's so polarized stop itself from being completely torn apart by hate? It's a question that takes us from just being observers to actually looking for some answers. Okay, so let's follow that thread. How does a big societal problem like this trickle down and become a tragic individual act of violence? We're going to look at a specific and frankly shocking event to really understand how this path works.
And this was the event that just shocked the nation, the fatal shooting of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk while he was speaking on a college campus. It was this moment of just profound tragedy, and it made a lot of people ask a really, really tough question.
So, how do people end up doing something so extreme? Well, the answer is incredibly complex, but what experts will tell you is that it's usually not a sudden snap. It's more of a gradual journey, a path that begins long, long before that final violent act.
And this is what experts actually call the pathway to violence. The big idea here is that violent behavior isn't an on-off switch. It exists on a continuum. Before you get to that final terrible act, there are usually a whole bunch of red flags. All these warning signs that show a person is moving further and further down this really dangerous path.
And this is so crucial. That path doesn't always start with a criminal record. I mean, look at the profile of Charlie Kirk's killer. No prior convictions, no formal political ties. But there were signs. A family member said he'd become more political. And here's the kicker. He believed his victim was full of hate. That right there points to that deep-rooted grievance we talked about, probably fueled by stuff he was seeing online or in the real world, that eventually just boiled over into this horrific act.
Okay, but this whole thing gets even more complicated, because now we have to talk about us. How do our own biases affect how we see these warning signs? Are we actually seeing things clearly, or do our own beliefs kind of put blinders on us?
And this quote just hits you right between the eyes. Do we pass different judgments on behavior depending on who it is? How biased are we in our perceptions? It's a direct challenge, really. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask if we're applying the same standards to everyone, no matter who they are.
So let's circle back to those marches in London for a second. Commentators started pointing out what looked like a double standard. They were asking, hey, if this were a left-wing march, would the media be so quick to call the attendees non-violent and very nice people? A phrase some were using for the folks at the right-wing rally. It just goes to show how easily our perceptions can get skewed.
There's actually a really great way to visualize this. It's called the bias impact tree. Okay, so think of it like this. Our unseen biases, the ones we might not even know we have, they're like the roots of a tree. If you ignore them, they just grow deeper, and eventually, they produce toxic fruit. The withering leaves on the tree, that's the hate, the discrimination, the stuff we can see. The point is, you can't just treat the leaves, the symptoms. You have to get down to the roots of the problem.
And this quote just nails it. Biases are the root cause of hate, discrimination, and oppression. These terrible behaviors, whether it's bullying or something way worse, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. They grow from those hidden roots, our own unchecked biases. Okay, so if bias is the root of the problem, what's the solution? How do we actually treat those roots and start to grow a healthier tree, both in ourselves and as a society? Let's take a look at a framework for how we can grow.
This is where Dr. Shungu M'gadzah, a leading educational psychologist, comes in. She argues that what we really need to do is develop our empathy and equity fitness. And I love how she frames this. These aren't just soft skills that are nice to have. No, she says they are absolute survival skills for any healthy, just society.
And to help us build that fitness, she created this really cool model. You've got two axes. The vertical one is the equity axis. That's all about our awareness and engagement with social justice. Then you have the horizontal empathy axis, which is about our compassion. Put them together and they give us a map of where we are, and more importantly, where we have the potential to go.
What's great about this model is that it shows a clear path for growth. You can move from what she calls a harmful stage through being reflective and curious, and hopefully, eventually, you arrive at that stage where you're empathic and oriented towards social justice, both emotionally connected and really focused on equity.
And look, this framework isn't just a tool for judging other people. It's really an invitation for us to look at ourselves, to ask, hey, where am I on this line? It gives us a pathway for our own growth, helping us get past being defensive and move toward a much more constructive way of understanding ourselves and the people around us.
All right, so let's get practical. How can we actively work on these skills? How do we take this framework and actually put it into practice to grow our own empathy and equity fitness in our day-to-day lives?
Well, one of the most powerful tools out there is something called anti-bias education. The whole idea is to teach us, kids and adults, how to recognize and name our own biases. Because that's the first step, right? Naming it. It helps shift the whole conversation away from shame and guilt and toward empowerment, giving us the actual tools to question the beliefs we've been conditioned to have.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. There are organizations like Teaching Tolerance, which is a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center, that have developed these incredible, comprehensive frameworks to guide this work, with clear standards for every single grade level in schools and for communities, too.
Their framework is built on 4 key pillars. It all starts with identity, helping us build a positive sense of who we are. From there, it moves to diversity, which is all about building respect and connection. Then comes justice, learning to spot unfairness and understand its impact. And finally, it all leads to action, learning how to actually stand up to injustice.
And that brings the whole challenge right back home, doesn't it? To each and every one of us. This isn't just some big, abstract societal problem. It's a personal one. So the real question is, what are the actual practical steps you can take this week, this month, this year to consciously build up your empathy and equity fitness?
And in the end, that's really the fundamental question this whole journey leaves us with. It's not just an invitation to think about things. It's an invitation to act, to do something meaningful and sustained in a world that, let's be honest, desperately needs it.